The next section of the Old Testament that we'll talk about are wisdom, psalms, and other works. This section of the Old Testament is an interesting part of the Old Testament, as the wisdom books, those of Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes, the Psalms, and then Lamentations and Song of Songs we have put here. These books are often disconnected in the historical story of Israel. And some of them are truly the most unique forms of Israel literature. So let's begin with a conversation on the wisdom books, Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. These books of wisdom contain no information about salvific history or that of salvation, but they give instruction for daily living in the wisdom of God. Job, as a story, serves as a narrative account and theology around retribution. It is one of the oldest books of the Old Testament and is meant to serve as a story, not as a history book. This is indicated in Job's location as the land of Uz, for there truly is no land of Uz. It's like a fairy tale, once upon a time in a faraway land. The story of Job begins with a peek behind the curtain and sets up Job as a righteous man who will have everything taken from him to prove that he is only faithful because of his prosperity and health. The central ideas of Job are that God is loving, he is righteous, and that justice is retributive. However, these ideas serve as a central conflict in the story. Is Job righteous? His friends who come to meet him are unsure. What does Job believe? That he is righteous and that retribution is the way of God, giving up on the love of God. The problem is that God shows up at the end of the story and declares that retribution is not the way that Job and his friends see it, that it truly does rain on the good and the bad. And God declares that Job is righteous and that he is loving. All that is taken away from Job he is given more of in the end of the story. The next book of wisdom is that of Proverbs. Proverbs is a collection of collections. It is of various wisdom sayings throughout Israel. It serves as the instruction for all people of Israel as to what is right and what is wrong. It's cliched sayings that you would probably have heard over and over again, but are significant enough to serve as indications for who God is and how we interact in this world. The book of Proverbs is a book based upon various sayings, and some of these are even international sayings, and help us give shape to the people of Israel, but redefined by the presence of Yahweh. Lastly, an important part of Proverbs is that these collections were common throughout the ancient Near East, but they would serve one purpose: to train up the royalty. Israel's Proverbs are unique as they are aimed at a wider audience than just those in a royal court. They truly serve everyone in developing what is right and what is wrong. The third book of wisdom is that of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a pretty pessimistic book at face value. The writer talks about how life and everything in it is pointless, and that the only good in life is food and drink. The reiterated lesson is that everything is vanity. Everything is just vapor. It disappears and dissipates quickly. But it is precisely because of the writer's faith that it is vanity. Not the rantings of an agnostic or atheistic person that everything is vanity. The writer makes an assumption about the reality of this world, that only faith in Yahweh are important. This wraps up the section of wisdom writings. The wisdom writings are important for understanding the scope of the Bible that is not just concerned about salvific history, but also about right relationship and dialogue with God. The wisdom books provide interesting theological opinions as well as guidance for living an upright life. The next section is about the Psalms. The Psalms serve as an interesting note about the form of worship that is found in the Old Testament. It is clear from archaeology that the people that inhabited the land of Israel would play various instruments. Drums, cymbals, horns, and other wind instruments. The people of Israel would spend a great deal of time singing, and this is found throughout the Old Testament. But it seems as if David sets up what we experience in the Psalms, as he has a hand in creating the worship culture and singing culture found in the Psalms. This is important to know as we move through the Psalms because they contain no singular theme. They talk about laments and joys. They are great treatises on Yahweh and examine the heart of who God is. The Psalms serve as Israel's worship handbook. And the Psalms are from all over the history of Israel, some coming early, some coming late, and some coming while in exile. The main thing that you have to remember about the Psalms is that they are not just poems, but songs. And they would be sung as acts of worship to God. There are multiple forms to what we call the Psalms today, and there is entire theories as to how to break down the Psalms as best we can. And while we could spend a lot of time doing that, the main part of understanding the Psalms is that they are truly acts of worship. They are meant to be sung and sung aloud to the Lord in lament, in joy, in questioning, in praise. The Psalms run the whole breadth and width of human emotions. The writings remaining are that of Lamentations and Song of Songs. These are two books that don't really fall into any category. The Lamentations are often connected with the prophet Jeremiah, but reading through the text, the authorship is hinted to someone anonymous. The Lamentations are 5 poems about the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BCE. The book of Lamentations is simply about grief. A grief of the destruction of God's temple, but also the destruction of Israel's holiness. For it is their sin in the Israelites' eyes that bring upon the destruction. Song of Songs is a unique book because it takes upon secular love songs. So, Song of Songs serves as a version as to what love songs would be in the ancient Near East. And it contains explicit sexual imagery and details the love between a man and a woman. In many cases, this piece of scripture was up for great debate as to whether or not it should be included in the canon of scripture. The main thing to know about this book is that it is a collection of ancient love songs that the Israelites would share with one another or recite to each other as lovers. For the Israelites, just like us, love a good love song. And it would make sense for people who are singing throughout the Old Testament to write good love songs. The main reason this book is in the canon of Scripture is because it exemplifies through romantic love the love that God has for his people.